Right? So we're going to talk about how pilgrimage can increase faith and spirituality. And a big question for us, as I think a Latter-day Saint community, is why does it matter? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. First of all, I know you know me, but I'm going to introduce myself. I'm James Gerke. I have been in leadership development for most of my career. I have a bachelor's degree in communication skills. And that set me on a path for working in sales and sales management, sales operations, a little bit of sales training. And then a little later on, I went back and I got a master's degree in leadership and management. And I started teaching leadership development for companies internally with a company back in '98. That's when I lived in Spain. And then externally, when I returned back to the US, I went out as a consultant, did that work since 2005. And so that's taken me on a journey. I've been on about 55 countries, I think, a little bit more than that. I just counted up, and what does it say? 125 organizations I think I've worked for in that time frame. And in that's probably hundreds, maybe approaching the thousands of people that I've led workshops for. Not that that matters, but it's just a passion for me. It's something that I've done, and I've spent my career working around people development. And as I do that, I realize there's a big correlation to what leaders learn and what we need as individuals. So my big interest, again, I'll tell you a little bit about this in a second. In 2009, I went out on pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. And it really impacted me. And then since then, I've been kind of fascinated by this whole topic of pilgrimage and pilgrims. And at first, I saw this correlation between pilgrimage and leadership. And then I saw this correlation between pilgrimage and life. And so I went back and started a graduate program a couple years ago, a doctoral in spirituality and pilgrimage studies. And I've been doing that, and that's what this presentation's evolved from, is a little bit of that. So the last thing I put on there is I'm a pilgrim. And I believe in a real sense, we're all pilgrims. We're on a pilgrimage here in life. If you think about it, God set up a plan where we come to earth, we leave what was known, we come to earth and we journey through a plan. And we have this nice, neat little plan, right? We live in a pre-existence, we forget, we come here, we get baptized, we do our covenants, we enter the covenant path, we marry in the temple, we die, and we return to Heavenly Father. It's not that easy. The pilgrims learn that the inspiration, the enlightenment of pilgrimage comes from the bumps and the valleys and the detours and the pain and the suffering that goes along with pilgrimage. And very much so, that's what our life's about. It's a life of learning through experience, of becoming enlightened through our life experience. So that's I consider myself a pilgrim for that reason. And before we get going, I want to set the stage. I'm going to be talking about pilgrimage. What is a pilgrimage? So what do you guys think?
Journey.
A journey.
Yeah, that's what it's a journey towards something, towards a goal.
Okay, so it's a journey. We went to Disneyland, that's kind of a journey, but is it a pilgrimage?
When I think
It's a
of
journey with a goal, sorry.
when I
Okay.
think of pilgrimage, I think of journey with spiritual intent or intent to reach some sort of emotional growth.
Okay. So a journey with intent, with a purpose, a spiritual quest of some sort. I would say it's a spiritual quest for whatever reasons, and it could be many things, but I sum it up and say it's enlightenment. It's to become more enlightened about my purpose here in life. Anything else? So what's the difference between a trip and a pilgrimage? I have some ideas here. So, I can't speak Latin very well, but I've been told, and I've come pretty close, it's peregrinum. And peregrinum means wandering over a long distance. Now, wandering isn't exactly what we think of when we think of pilgrimage, because you all said you have to have a goal, you have to have a focus. There's a purpose involved in it. There's some type of quest involved in it. In the Middle Ages, when they did pilgrimage, that was for enlightenment, for a spiritual enlightenment, just I want to learn more. It was also for penance. They had done something wrong and they wanted to show God that they were willing to suffer in order to get forgiveness. It was also ordered sometimes. So if you're a repeat offender in town, they might want to get rid of you. So they'd send you on pilgrimage for a few years. And with the hope that it was some type of, I was talking to Angela, who's a therapist, right? Some type like a day treatment, except an extended day treatment, right? They're putting them into some type of therapy for a long period of time, or they're doing penance for a long period of time. And then they come back with some type of enlightenment. So that's part of it. It's undertaken for a quest, or a motive, or a purpose, where a trip we do for what? Entertainment. Enjoyment, right? So I would say that
Necessity.
a pilgrimage can be a trip, or sometimes is a trip, but a trip is not always a pilgrimage, right? So so I mentioned the Disneyland trip. We went to Disneyland as a secular pilgrimage. And there are people who really take it seriously. I learned a lot about it. I didn't know that people collected pins and paraphernalia and all, I didn't know, and dressed up in the garb, and they have a real purpose for it. For them, it's almost a pilgrimage. And there's a lot of similarities. When you go on pilgrimage on the Way of St. James, you collect stamps instead of pins, right? You get that stamped in a passport book. People dress up in a certain way because they're pilgrims. They carry signs and symbols. Here it is, which is a shell, which I'll talk about that. You usually wear it over your neck, or on the backpack, or on your bike, whatever you're doing. So there's similarities between, and take another one, go to Graceland, right? People take that very seriously. They dress up as Elvis, they collect things. So it's similar in that that's a secular type pilgrimage, and this, what we're talking about, would be more of a spiritual, religious pilgrimage.
So the first time I ever heard of pilgrimage was people going to Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very much a religious, and it was to go there to worship. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I see that goal and that depth and that spiritual reason for going.
Yeah, absolutely. So usually, I think most people recognize Mecca as one of the 5 pillars of Islam that they must do, or they're requested, if at all possible, to do in a lifetime, right? So there's the prayers they do daily. There's submission to the Lord. There's different things that they do, but pilgrimage is one of them. So in a Christian context, we don't have that same obligation, but it's existed for a long, long time. Hello, come on in. Don't be sorry. I just got started, so we're talking about really what pilgrimage is. So I was just pointing that pilgrimage is a journey, a quest with a purpose. You're going somewhere specific with a promise, with a purpose, with a focus, where a trip we generally think of as just kind of for entertainment or enjoyment. There may be a purpose in general for going, but it's not the same commitment, not the same level of focus that you might have. Okay? And so here's some examples. Mecca is a good example of a modern pilgrimage, right? In the ancient world, one of my favorite examples of a pilgrimage is to the Temple of Apollo. So does anyone know? This is test time. Does anybody know what the Temple of Apollo was, where it was, and why they went there? Okay? So it's a great story, I think. Delphi, tomato, I don't know which is correct. Delphi was considered the center of the world in Greek mythology. So this is a stone that sits in Delphi, and it was considered the center point of the universe, that very spot. And that very spot represents an umbilical cord. So they said this is the navel of the universe, which is a great way of thinking about a spiritual place to connect to God, isn't it? Because if you think, what does the umbilical cord do? It feeds the fetus. It nourishes the fetus. And so this spiritual spot was the umbilical connection to God, where God, or the gods in Greek mythology, fed the human race. So people went on pilgrimage there, and they went to a temple of Apollo. This is what remains of the temple. And the temple of Apollo was placed there for a couple of interesting reasons. One, it was the center of the universe, so they came to be fed. So people came with questions, and they wanted to ask Apollo about their life, or about their kingdom, or about family relations, or whatever they may have an interest in. And underneath the temple, so this represents kind of a pillar separating it. That's Apollo talking to a priestess. And the priestess sat on a tripod. And the tripod sat on a fissure in the rock. And if you look at that area, it's very rocky, very mountainous. There's a fissure, there's a fault line that went under it. Well, underneath that fault line, gases escaped. There were volcanic fumes. She sat on that. And she was probably, we assume, was kind of high, right, on the fumes. And so when asked questions, she responded in kind of gibberish. And there was a priest that interpreted the gibberish and then gave that message to the supplicant that came on pilgrimage. People came from all over the Greek world, which was most, if you think about it, most of the Eastern Mediterranean world. They came from everywhere. So there's a few examples here. One was an example of a king who was being threatened by Persia. Persia was ancient Greeks' kind of arch rival. And Persia was always pushing on the Greek city-states. And they said to this king, pay us tribute or we're going to attack and we'll subjugate you, make you slaves. So he, being a good king, being a religious king, went to Delphi, went into the temple and asked, should I go to war against Persia? And this question went down to the priestess. The priestess said some gibberish. The priest interpreted, went to the king and said, if you go to war against Persia, a great kingdom will fall. So he thought, I'm a small kingdom. Persia is a great kingdom. I'm going to beat them. He went to war and lost. So on the walls, it's kind of hard to see this, on the walls of the temple was a sign, that's probably Spanglish, a saying, that said, know thyself. And that was the key. So you went on pilgrimage to do what? To get answers to your prayers or your questions, or to know yourself. You went to know yourself. So another example was Athens also came up against Persia at one point. And they went and they asked, should we go to war or not? Gibberish came back, interpretation came back, and it said something to the effect, I should have looked it up right before, but something to the effect, on your timbers, you will surpass this other kingdom. You'll overcome this kingdom. On your timbers. So they thought, did that mean our forts? Does that mean our weapons? And someone came up and said, that means our ships. Our ships are made out of timbers. So they said, well, we don't have any ships. Well, we better build some then. So they built a bunch of ships, and that helped them prevail against this particular attack. So the whole thing it comes back to is, it was more important to know who they were, right, themselves, their strengths, their vulnerabilities. And they had to reflect upon that. That's why it was written on the wall. Go ask the priestess, but really reflect on who you are, right, and why it matters. Hello, come on in. Ricardo, good to meet you in person. We're going to, I'm just going to keep going, all right? So we'll catch up a little bit. Here's another one that may ring true to most of us, right? The Plymouth Colony. We always call them, who settled the Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts? The Pilgrims, right? And what were they doing? Oh, I'm going to say this. This is the first lesson, I think, is know yourself. That's the first lesson of pilgrimage in my mind. The second one was to have a vision or a focus. What did the Pilgrims come to America for? Freedom of religion, for religious freedom, right? They were persecuted in England, they went to Holland, they had some semblance of religious freedom there. Then the colonies opened up, they were under pressure there, and they left. They immigrated, they left the old world, came to the new world. Not only were they pilgrims in that they went a trip, this one, for most of them, was a one-way trip. And they had this vision, right? They had a vision of a city on a hill, a new Jerusalem, a new world, a new order, a new way of living, right? And they had that focus. In the first year, half of them died. half of them died the first year. They were willing to die for it. It was the journey that was important for them. But it was the focus that they had that was inspiring, right? So I think part of that, what's the legacy that comes from them? The Bill of Rights, right? That religious of freedom, that was ingrained in our Constitution eventually. So here's another one you may know of. The Mormon Trail, or the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint Trail. I don't know what to call it anymore, but it's the Mormon Trail on the history site still. What's the lesson we learned from them? As what I learned is, as they're crossing the Mississippi River there in the dead of winter, I think it's perseverance. The willingness to stick to it, right? No matter what. Angela and I went on pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage, and followed from the Sacred Grove all the way down to Salt Lake. We drove it. And we stopped off at most of the sites that we could fit into our time frame. And one of the things that impressed me was that winter quarters, right, when you're standing on those grave sites and you see how many of them died. It was the perseverance to do and to sacrifice. That's probably another one, yeah?
But the ones that survived said, even though we went through all that hardship, we're glad we did.
Mm-hmm.
We would do it again.
It's the experience, again, where's the learning from, where's the enlightenment come from pilgrimage? Not the fact that they came and landed in Salt Lake, right? Today we'd fly over and land in Salt Lake and we'd say, oh, we did a pilgrimage. No, it was that suffering, that perseverance, that something deep inside, right, that drove them. Yes?
Can I just add to that, yeah, when Jan was talking about that one of the survivors actually said that suffering was the price they paid to be acquainted with God. And I think that was a beautiful...
It's a beautiful quote. Suffering was the price they paid for the acquaintance,
to become acquainted
with God. And that's very much a principle of pilgrimage. And what are some of the legacies that we get from our pioneer ancestors? I just put a few up there. Here's church statistics from 2021. So it went from a very small church to 3,000, nearly 3,500 stakes, 400 missions, 500 districts, 31,000 branches, membership 16 million, and goes down and looks at, and then temples in operation 170. I don't know if any of those, as they were struggling across the plains, if they ever imagined this. I don't know. Maybe they did. But that's the legacy that perseverance leads to. So there's several things. I said it's the know thyself. It's that intense focus on a destination, but not just a destination on a map, but a destination in your heart. And the perseverance and the sacrifice that one puts into to know God, to become acquainted with God, to become enlightened. So here is the Camino de Santiago. In English, it's the Way of St. James. This is what introduced me to pilgrimage. And so I learned, as I've done this and I reflect upon it, there's several lessons we learn from pilgrimage that I learned on the Camino de Santiago. But also, as I talk to other pilgrims, I realize it's a common thing that they all experience, or nearly all experience, or some experience, and I've heard it resonate in many, many other people. Said in different ways, but they come down to some common themes. So, if you know me and you've heard me talk, you might know a little bit about the Way of St. James, but you may not have ever heard of it. So does that ring a bell to anyone, what the Way of St. James is?
Only from you.
Only from me. So look, we brought this up. This is, I have a map there too. This is the Way of St. James. So this is the Iberian Peninsula, right, in Spain. So over here is Portugal. I need a banner. Thank you, Ricardo. So over here is Portugal. Oh, sorry, more like this. This is Spain, this is France, this is the Pyrenees Mountains. So I've done this 4 times. I've done it on the northern route that comes along the Blue Trail down to Santiago. Angela and I did the French route, which is this red route, through the middle. It's kind of the flat land. The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain. It doesn't. It's very hot and dry, but that's where it goes. and then it comes up through the mountains and over to Santiago. And then just this last year, or this year, we went up from the Portuguese way, started right around here and came up and went this way along the kind of the inner coastline there. But there's many paths, there's many ways. This comes from, thank you, this comes from the Middle Ages. It's called a 1,000-year-old journey. And it started in about the year 800, and it's been done continuously since by millions, literally millions of people. Hundreds of thousands do it every year today still. So it's left quite a legacy. This is the path we went, starting in Saint Jean Pied de la Porte, came down through Pamplona, Burgos, Leon, and then up to Santiago de Compostela.
500 kilometers.
It's about 790
500
kilometers.
miles, sorry, 790 kilometers, 500
790 kilometers, that's roughly 500 miles. Okay? So this is Angela's we got started. Look how happy we were. We weren't always that happy along the way. The way is marked by shells. Okay? So the symbol of the Camino de Santiago is a scallop shell. And the reason being is that it points the way. There's many paths, like grooves of a shell, all leading to one, all coming together in one spot. It's many paths, many lives, many purposes, all coming to one. And then they would say in one in Christ in the old days. Now people do it for religious reasons, they do it for secular reasons, they do it for history, they do it for exercise, they do it all. But I would say one thing, when you ask people, what have you learned? They say, something happened. I learned something about myself. I had an experience, I had an epiphany, I had some reawakening of some sort. It doesn't always have to be spiritual, but something like that happens to most people. Okay? So you follow the shell, or you follow, it's been shortened into just a yellow arrow. So you can literally walk 500 miles without a map. You just follow the shell and the arrow. And you can go 790 kilometers without a map right to Santiago. It's another lesson about pilgrimages, is that there's a guide, there's a purpose, there's a direction. There's a trust, thank you. That's a good way to put it as well. Yeah. So it's beautiful. It's tranquil. It's part of my studies, I've talked about sacred places. I believe it's a sacred place. First and foremost, because God created the earth for us. And the earth is a sacred place. And I think you find spiritual reawakening in nature, in natural places. And so if you can see it, we're sitting up on top of the hill, and it goes down this path, up around this hill here. So you see these great vistas all the time of where you're going or where you've been. It's beautiful. And these are very typical of the paths that you walk down as well. So it's a beautiful place, and this is us at the final resting spot. Finally we got there. We dropped the bikes, we relaxed, and we're looking at the cathedral there at the very end. The cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It's there for, I haven't said that, have I? It's there because Catholics believe that's where the remains of St. James the Great, the apostle St. James, Peter James and John James, is buried there. Okay? Whether he is or not, I don't know. And to me it doesn't matter, because I think it becomes a sacred place because people are searching for this spiritual enlightenment by going there. And again, it's the sacrifice of the journey to get them there. I've told this story before, and some of you may have heard it, but I had left, and it's an analogy again of a trial you're going through life. I'm going through a trial in life, and now I'm on Camino, this mini life pilgrimage. And so the day before was really, really, really hard. And I was very tired, and there was a time, and it wasn't this exact night, but it probably leads all connected up to it. I didn't sleep at all. So I had one of these nights like that. I get up late. I was on a bike. I get on the bike and I start riding. It had rained the night before. It was muggy and it was hot and I was miserable. So I stopped for lunch. Park the bike under a tree, get a sandwich, take it, go to sleep, wake up, now I'm running late. I'm not going to make my destination. So I'm going like from here to here, and I'm running behind, and I'm going, oh no, gotta get going. So I get going, no arrows. No arrows. I just told you you can go the whole way without an arrow. What happens when there's no arrow? You think I might have missed something, right? But, so what do? I'll keep going a little bit. Finally, there's an arrow pointing left. I go, great. So off I go, and I'm going down. I go, okay, this is too far. There should be another arrow. And I come up to a tavern that's on the corner, and a young lady's there, and she goes, hey, buen camino. And that's what you say, good journey to the fellow pilgrims. So I come over, and she goes, are you a pilgrim? I go, yes. Are you? Yes, I'm lost. I said, well, I'm afraid to admit it, but I think I am too. And short of it is she didn't speak Spanish. She couldn't get direction from the bar owner. He finally explained to us you have to go across this field, and there's really no trail there, but you'll go there and see that mountain in the distance. You're going to climb that mountain, and on top of there's a shelter for the night. And it's run by an old Catholic priest. You'll be good there. So the side story is the bar owner pointed that arrow down to divert traffic to his bar. So again, does the path turn out the way we want in life? It never does there either. So I head out on bike across like a muddy cornfield and can't ride it. I have panniers on the back of the bike that probably weigh 40 pounds, way too much I should have been carrying. And I'm pushing this bike through the mud. And I'm hot, and I'm tired, and I'm miserable, and I'm mad because of the bar owner, and I'm mad because I'm not going to get to where I wanted to go, and I'm behind my schedule. How much does that sound like life? Right? So finally I get there. There's a man, he looks like Santa Claus. He's waiting at the door. He says, welcome. He puts the bike up. He says, stay there, stay there. Runs in, gets some glasses of water, cold water, gets a ice cold pad or cloth, cookies, and he sits me down and he says, here, and he literally is patting the sweat off my face and the back of my neck, giving me crackers. I'm drinking water. I'm feeling like a king. Sets me into my little area to sleep, and then comes back and says dinner will be ready at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever. No, we're in Spain. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Come back then. So I do, and he's got a fireplace, and we're all gathered around. He's got a dining room table, and he's got some soup and bread that he and his helpers, it's not just him alone, his helpers are making. There's about 10 of us, 15 of us max. And no girl that I saw before. If I remember correctly, she was from Holland. She's nowhere to be seen. It's now dark. It was raining the night before. It's now cold. And I'm thinking, I wonder where she is. I wonder, maybe she found another way. Well, eventually, we're all done eating. We're gathered around the fireplace. We're getting warm. Knock on the door. He goes to the door, opens the door, and she's there, and she immediately just bursts into tears. Burst into tears. And he sits her down. He says, helpers, come and help. They sit down, same thing. But now it means something more to me. He's taking the cloth, he's wiping her tears, her sweat, the mud. They take her shoes off. She goes, I can't walk. I have blisters so bad I can't walk. He says, relax. They take off her socks. He takes the water. I don't want to exaggerate. He and his helpers are doing this. It's not all him, but he's there. He's directing it. And they clean her feet. They're kneeling at her feet, cleaning her feet. And I realized why I went. I realized why I was on pilgrimage. I realized that I said, that's what we should be doing. That's what you should be doing. So pilgrimage means something, especially when we're going through life challenges. And maybe it's appropriate because it's those challenges that we face on the Camino that give us strength that we can overcome the challenges of life. I think that's a big part of it, perseverance, like our pioneer ancestors. They kept going, they were focused. Like the Pilgrim ancestors, they had a vision of what the future would be. Right? And in life, if we lose that, then we struggle, and we fall, and we stumble. And pilgrimage helps us, I think, teaches us a way to see that in our own lives.
And to bless others. Because that's
And
what
to
you
bless
got.
others.
And that you think of the pilgrims, they blessed others.
Yes. So I say it's to serve and to be served.
Mhm.
Yep.
I was just going to say that too. It's the connection to the other, kind of what you were saying. All paths converge, and that's when you meet, you get to know yourself, but also you get to know other.
The other. And it is the encounter with the other that's important. So you encounter the other day in, day out, people you don't know, some of you journeying with a wild force, some of you lose track of, but they all are in the search of the same thing, enlightenment for their own lives.